Hello and welcome to part two of the Two Towers. Yes, we start off with a flashback of Gandalf falling to his death. So it's nice to start off with a happy memory. But we then find out he's alive and there goes the happy. So as Gandalf falls, he catches his sword and turns himself into a missile and attacks the also falling Balrog, cursing and stabbing it as he does so. Even I must admit it's a badass scene, and then Gandalf falls off the Balrog again, but still keeps cursing and swinging his sword like a madman. Then, as the Balrog crashes into an underground lake, Gandalf decides to stab it in the head just for good measure. Frodo wakes up and a second later remembers just how fucked his life is. Frodo and Sam really wish such useful items like a map or compass existed, or something even more outlandish like a giant flying animal. Frodo has a panic attack and promptly pisses himself. They then ramble about in random directions because going in a straight line or keeping their destination in view, or many other simple ways of, not getting lost, is somehow beyond their understanding. While pretending to sleep, they are attacked by an albino ghoul called Colin, though between Frodo and Sam's deep knowledge of jiu-jitsu and a very pointy sword, they capture Colin and put a sparkly elven leash on him. Of course, all Colin does is act like a petulant child complaining about his expensive new leash, being dragged about in random directions, and having no Wi-Fi reception. Then, for reasons that are beyond me, instead of putting Colon out of his misery, or at the very least giving him a less revealing loincloth, Frodo decides to set him free. Yes, I'm sure that'll end well. Merry and Pippin, who are still being carried by the Urkants like talking backpacks, and whose only way of fighting back is pissing down the backs of their captors, have not had their spirits broken by the situation. Maybe because they don't actually understand their situation. Either way, Pippin somehow has a thought that turns into a very good idea and drops his limited edition Lothlorien leaf cape clasp, a clue for the three amigos to follow. A rock told Strider which way the Urkants are travelling, which was nice of it. Then Strider and Legolas sprint off in pursuit, leaving poor Gimli on his short legs trying to keep up. And so for many scenes, the friends continue to run and then run some more, without rest or changing their underwear. I think our three heroes do not know the dangers of crotch rot. Strider finds Pippin's clue, and Strider and Legolas take off running again, while Gimli figures out rolling down hills is better than running down them. At Isengard, Saruman is receiving more instructions from his crystal ball and discussing them with the voices in his head. A clone army then marches from Barad-dûr as Sharn watches on with his one good eye. We see Saruman and his inbred children making some of the worst weapons and armor ever made. Apparently, Saruman is a quantity over quality kind of guy, which makes his inspections of his warriors a little redundant. Then Saruman delivers a rousing and emotional speech about the evils of soap to a group of village idiots. The village idiots then start rampaging across the countryside, destroying soap shops, and then burning down farms and killing the farmers who grow all their food, showing the reasons they're called idiots. A young boy and his sister escape on a four-legged creature that would only confuse the three amigos. A group of Viking knights ride into Whiterun. We meet this movie's heroine, Eowyn, as she watches her brother dying. Then shown to us as a king that might actually be dead, but definitely hasn't been dusted in a while. Obvious guy, obvious bad guy is so obvious I'm surprised no one's offed him yet. The worm then has Emomir banished from Whiterun for cock blocking him with Eowyn. The trio do even more running, which makes me hope for their sake that at some point they'd have remembered to stretch. Murray thinks he hears the tree speaking to him, and finally accepts he may have long-term side effects of weed abuse, or a severe concussion. Either are likely. The Uricants have an internal disagreement about the lack of menu options, which after much discussion is solved by cannibalism. Murray and Pippin take the opportunity to try escaping, but are caught by a salivating Herbert, who is prevented from enjoying the two young boys by a group of Vikings on horseback who start killing anything that moves, which does not improve Murray and Pippin's plight, as now instead of avoiding one type of potential death, they now have to avoid many. The trio, who still have not tired of running, and worse, have no idea where the finish line is, meet and are surrounded by the Viking knights on strange four-legged creatures. Emomir then asks for their names, and for some unknown reason, Gimli thinks it's a good time to start shit. Emomir responds in kind, which leads to Legolas backing up Gimli with his bow and the Vikings pointing a few dozen lances at our friends' heads. Strider, in order to calm the tense situation, explains their quest about rescuing Merry and Pippin. A now sheepish looking Emomir informs Strider that in their exuberance they killed the entire group of Uricants and barbecued them, but don't know if the hobbits were among the corpses. Though because Emomir is such a stand-up guy, he gives the trio two horses. Why two, you ask? Well, that's because Emomir has not forgotten Gimli's flaxing, who now has to ride bitch for eternity. The trio arrive at the remains of the barbecue, and after Gimli finds one of the hobbit's little belts, Strider decides it's the best time in the world to break his toe. Then, while having a moment embracing the pain from his toe, Strider goes full Sherlock Holmes after noticing a blade of grass slightly out of place. In a flashback, we see what actually happened the night before. A weed-free Pippin not only is able to cut his own bonds, but also frees Merry, and they dodge death from every direction for a while and escape the main violence by running into Fangorn Forest being chased by Herbert. After running for a while, they decide to climb a tree, but Herbert catches Murray's leg. Pippin, while trying to figure out how to help Murray, is more than a little shocked to see the tree's eyes open and come to life. Though the tree does turn our friend Herbert into fertilizer by squishing him. Yes, we now have talking trees. It would seem Mr. Tolkien also indulged in the halfling's leaf. Merry and Pippin then try convincing the talking tree that they're good hobbitses. Not being sold on this, the talking tree decides he will find out the truth by taking them to the White Wizard. Foreshadowing is foreshadowing. Merry and Pippin then meet the Wild Wizard, and ooh! Frodo and Sam are still being led by Colon, going from a mountain to a swamp, which is progress of a sort. A swamp which not only has random jets of fire, but the waters of the swamp are filled with the undead corpses. So that's nice. They are so nice that Frodo decides to get a closer look by diving in head first, which goes about as well as you'd expect, as the undead corpses try to ensnare his soul for all time. And Frodo is only saved by Colon. That night, Frodo gently strokes his ring for comfort, which might be a warning sign. Then he looks at Colon and sees his future if he keeps stroking his ring. Frodo and Colon are having an emotional heart-to-heart when Frodo's PSD is triggered by a goth knight doing a flyby on a giant flying lizard. As the trio make their way through Fangorn Forest on the trail of Merry and Pippin, Legolas informs them that the trees don't want Gimli making a fire or chopping wood, so reluctantly Gimli lowers his axe. Pussy. The trio come face to face with a blinding white light, who beats them easily, and as the light starts to fade, we see the White Wizard is in fact Captain James T. I'm kidding, it's Gandalf. Though a new and improved Gandalf who has learned to use soap on his clothes and himself. Let's hope he does a better job this time round. Gandalf explains through flashback that after falling into the underground lake, He and the Balrog swam to shore, dried off, had some tea, then fought again from miles beneath the earth right up to the top of a tower, which has a staircase 3 times too small for the Balrog. Let's just pretend he flew up. Regardless, once up there, Gandalf uses lightning to charge up his sword and kills the Balrog and somehow himself. Then, after meeting God, God sends him back to start a new life, which makes Gandalf the first Isekai anime character, which is pretty cool. When they make it out of Fangorn Forest, Gandalf whistles for his magic horse, which shows up in seconds, which is quite convenient. Though it does mean our group has horses now, showing Mr. Tolkien really needed to get the story moving along, and teleportation spells might have been a bit much. Merry and Pippin are travelling with their new friend, creatively named Treebeard, who is teaching them the history of the ants, which may or may not be relevant at some point. Frodo and Sam come across the Black Gate and rule out pretending to be Uber Eats to try and get through. The gate's open to let in an army of knights from the Old Republic. While this is happening, Sam and the boulder he's laying on go over the edge and roll down the mountain, which the enemy army doesn't notice. They also don't notice Frodo running down the mountain after Sam, but for some reason they do notice a few pebbles rolling down a slight hill. Frodo reaches Sam and something rather strange happens, as Frodo's cloak turns into a rock covering the two from view of the enemy, which brings up a couple of issues. If the cloaks given to them by Lady Galadriel can change colour, shape and texture, why didn't the group just go the main road and disappear when needed? And two, with all the encounters Frodo and Sam get into, why is this power never used before or again? So as far as plot holes go, we have giant eagles and magic cloaks. Colon then convinces Frodo and Sam to go a different way into Mordor. Gandalf and friends ride into a famous Skyrim city, but known in Lord of the Rings as Edoras. Eowyn is in mourning at the loss of her brother, and because Worm can't read a room, he tries to riz her up. Gandalf then cons his way into the Longhouse by pretending to be an old man. I'm starting to think Gandalf has never used a mirror. They have to give up their weapons to get in, and yet the guards let Gandalf the Wizard, who's known throughout the Riddermark and many other places as Gandalf the Wizard, in with his funny looking walking stick. Apparently, the Riddermark Temp Agency is not sounding its best. Worm whispers sweet nothings into King Theo's corpse, warning of his new guests. And it takes Worm, who works for, and no spoilers, but let's just say he should know what a wizard's staff looks like, 2 whole minutes to figure out that Gandalf the Wizard is not carrying a walking stick. As often happens with our group, violence breaks out all of a sudden as they begin laying into Worm's henchmen, as the actual guards do nothing. It turns out King Theo is being possessed by Saruman, who takes the piss out of Gandalf. Gandalf then reveals his true colours, pun intended, and drives out Saruman by whacking King Theo in the head with his staff, which knocks Saruman on his ass from half a country away, which is very impressive, though God knows only what sort of brain damage King Theo now has. As if by magic, King Theo de-ages in seconds, not even needing to shave or shower. Of course, the first thing Gandalf does is bring him his sword. No change of underwear, no breath mint, no a weapon. Worm tries to fly and fails. Then King Theo tries killing Worm but is stopped by Strider. Why, I have no idea, but it allows Worm the chance to steal a horse and escape, while the actual guards do nothing again. Anyone else seen problem here. King Theo visits the grave of his son and brags about how pretty it is. Strange time for a flax, but okay. The kids who survived the village idiots make it to Whiterun, where Ewan feeds them the wateriest soup I have ever seen. Talk about kicking someone when they're down. Gandalf then uses the kids to get King Theo to go to war. So Gandalf the Grey was a pothead, and Gandalf the White is a warmonger. Good to know. Strider also tries egging Theo into war, as Legolas does his best impression of a mime, and Gimli drinks himself stupid. In the end, King Theo actually wants to save his people and chooses to take refuge in a fort called Helm's Deep. For some reason, Gandalf the Warmonger gets pissy over Theo trying to save his people and rides off in a huff. Eowyn then tests a sword, and Strider compliments her form. This is somehow enough to make her crave Strider's baby butter. King Theo, ruler of the Horse Lords, rides out of Whiterun with surprisingly few cavalry soldiers, wagons, or even horses. Not even a donkey or two to try and make up the numbers. Worm, of course, has ridden to his manager Saruman to reveal King Theo's plan to hide in his pillared fort, which will surprise no one. Saruman then orders the release of his warg riders, not the wargs, just the riders themselves for some reason. Frodo has a go at Sam over Colon. Now, if I was Sam and had to deal with being forced to go on a dangerous journey by a mad wizard, almost dying on a mountain, almost dying in a mine, and almost dying in a river, while having to put up with Frodo's mood swings, I would have beaten the shit out of Frodo and facked off back home. Colon then has a schizophrenic episode and starts arguing with the voices in his head, which is what you want in your guide. Though in the end, the good voices win and he celebrates by jumping around like a loony. Colon brings Frodo two dead hares. For some reason, Colon now thinks he's a house cat. Sam then makes a stew out of them, and continuing his run of bad luck, he finds out he is no spuds. Frodo and Sam see an army of Indian Arab or whatever they're meant to actually be, and instead of making a hasty getaway, stay to enjoy the elephant parade. The army from somewhere is attacked by a band of merry men, and Frodo and Sam are captured by their leader, Robin. On the track to Helm's Deep, Gimli informs us that dwarf women are almost as hairy as the men, which is why no one can tell them apart. Which makes me think there's been quite a few surprise encounters in dwarven bedrooms. Gimli then shows off his riding prowess by promptly falling off his horse. Of course, this might have been a well executed plan for Gimli to get felt up by Eowyn. Strider has a spicy dream about Arwen, which is interrupted by a flashback of Elrond warning Strider to stop dating his daughter or shit's going to get real. Strider actually listens to Elrond and tries breaking up with Arwen, but she's having none of it. King Theo's almost horseless refugees is attacked by goblins riding wargs, a creature created by an unnatural offspring of a lion and a hyena, but not as cuddly as either, which leads to Legolas finding the most awkward way in history to mount a horse. The battle begins and Gimli attacks by falling off his horse, then kills a warg which falls on him. So not the best start. Gimli then kills a goblin which falls on the warg on top of him. On top of that, Strider kills a second warg which falls on top of the goblin on top of the warg on top of Gimli. Either Gimli's luck has taken a turn for the worse, or one Mr. Jackson has decided Gimli's fate in this movie is to be comic relief. After killing several wargs and the riders, Strider gets the urge to ride one himself and tries taking it, and after some stabby is able to unseat the rider, but karma strikes, as one of the braziers he stole from Boromir's corpse gets stuck in the warg's harness, which would have not have been a problem, but for the fact the warg decides he wants to try flying and does a header over a ravine into a river below with Strider still attached. Legolas and Gimli find out what happened to Strider and pour one out for their homie. We get our first look at Helm's Deep, which from afar is quite impressive as far as proper bunkers go. King Theo rides through the squatters to his daughter Eowyn and delivers the sad news about Strider, which upsets Eowyn as it means no baby butter for her. We got a shot of Helm's Deep only and conveniently placed weak point. I wonder if that will be relevant later. The morally questionable yet ingenious Saruman invents TNT, something Middle Earth could really do without. Saruman then has to stop Worm from turning the both of them into a very fine mist. We get a scene showing Saruman's army, and judging by its size and how the Urukants are created, Isengard must have the most fertilized soil in Middle Earth, and Saruman must have been using his seed as fertilizer for centuries. Strider floats up on shore of the river, and in a dream is saved by Arwen, kissing life back into him. But in reality, his horse is the one trying to get a bit of tongue action. But the horse does save Strider by carrying him away to safety. Elrod tells Arwen it's time for her to leave or she'll miss the bus. Arwen has a dream where she stands grieving over Strider's body, which is very sad. Then it gets even more depressing as she's still watching the crypt when the world is all dead. I might fast forward. Faramir, is looking at a map, one of those things Gandalf never used and didn't give to Frodo. Well, looking at this map, we see we are north of Osgiliath, and I'm actually going to congratulate myself there that I got that word right in the first go, which is in Gondor. Now, I'm going to point something out here I've never noticed before while watching the movies and found out while watching them again to do this. Frodo and Sam were meant to go to Mordor. They were even at its gates. All they had to do was go a few miles down the road and climb over the mountain range, which we have seen them do before. Yes, they've already crossed one mountain range. But instead, Colon leads them into Gondor, not far away from Minas Tirith. So, if they had bound and gagged Gandalf, thrown him on a horse, and followed Boromir's plan to go there in the first place, the whole fellowship could have been exactly where Frodo and Sam are now, with no near-death experiences, no blizzard-covered mountain, no goblin-infested mine, no deaths at all. So, this proving Boromir was correct yet again, and also proving that Gandalf the Grey was an incompetent tosser. Faramir then questions Frodo and Sam about his brother, Boromir's death, which gets a little awkward to say the least. That night, Faramir asks Frodo if he owns a Colon. Frodo denies any knowledge of a Colon right up until Faramir threatens to fill Frodo's Colon with his men's shafts. Frodo helps Faramir to capture Colon to save his life, though in the process of questioning Colon, Faramir finds out Frodo has the One Ring, and a few moments later, he finds it. It is at this moment Faramir finds the ring that Frodo freaks out and starts doing his best Colon impression. Sam then explains to Faramir that the ring is making Frodo a bit soft in the head. Strider gets a glimpse of Saruman's army and after a quick underwear change, legs it. Strider rides into Helm's Deep and Gimli greets him with a big hug. Legolas is also relieved to see Strider alive, but can't help but we'll try that again, everybody. Legolas is also relieved to see Strider alive, but can't help but make fun of Strider's split ends. After entering the Grand Hall like a boss, he informs everybody that the Horde is coming. King Theo then brags about the strength of Helm's Deep's walls. Strider tries getting Theo to call for Gondor's aid, but once again King Theo puffs out his chest and say they can take the horde, which makes me think he hasn't the first clue what he's doing, just like the architect of Helm's Deep. Let's be honest, it's a terrible design. There's no ditches or spike pits to slow an enemy force down. There's no moat to slow down or stop the use of ladders. No drawbridge to stop rams. And it also has no counter defenses like trebuchets. Add to that the fact that most of the soldiers are old men and children with no training, and let's then not forget the obvious weak point, the drain, that doesn't even work right considering the small lake beside it. At this point, the only thing we can hope for is that the enemy army is dumber than the defenders. Treebeard takes Merry and Pippin to meet with the other talking trees to have a chinwag about the end of the world. King Theo has the civilians put in the underground caverns beneath the keep. Well, except for the old age pensioners and the kids who shall be used as cannon fodder. Legolas suggests the press gang rabble may not be adequate to win the upcoming battle, a fact anyone with common sense would agree with. Strider responds to this statement by proudly proclaiming he shall die with them. It's at this moment that Legolas accepts one of his best mates is in fact a moron. Everyone prepares for battle as the king puts on his Sunday best. Strider then tries convincing a 13-year-old boy that the rusty old sword filled with nicks will somehow prevent his slow, painful death. Legolas and Strider kiss and make up as Gimli lifts everyone's moods with some comic relief by trying on a dress. Then, shockingly, 200 heavily armed elves show up, bloodthirsty and ready for a slaughter. Strider is so overjoyed by this, he immediately starts filling them up. As all the soldiers line up on the battlement as easy targets for the enemy, Legolas makes fun of Gimli's height, proving elves do have a sense of humour, but no sense of timing. The battle begins as many do with volleys of arrows from either side. The only confusing choice here is why 100 elves are blind firing from behind the wall. Having no spike pit or moat to stop them, the Uruk-hai start using ladders. Who could have seen that coming? As the Uruk-hai are now in the battlements within the first 3 minutes, and things have turned into an absolute free-for-all, Legolas and Gimli decide to make a game out of it, which may be in poor taste considering the growing pile of friendly corpses. Back at the Firewood Council, we learn it takes the ants several hours just to decide what to discuss first, which is another example of why governments can never get anything done. For some unknown reason, with the outer wall already being overrun, King Theo is boasting about how badass they are. Karma must have been listening because that's when we see the badly designed and obvious weak point drain being filled with explosives, and then an Olympic runner does a suicide dive and kaboom! Half the wall disappears. Needless to say, King Theo ain't cocky no more. The Uruk-hai, aided by the fact there's no drawbridge, start ramming the door, and because apparently burning pitch doesn't exist in Middle-earth either, the only thing they have to deal with are a few small stones. Gimli has a mental lapse and thinks he's at the pool and cannonballs into the enemy. Then Strider proves he is one of the lowest IQs in Middle-earth because instead of letting the elf archers, who have plenty of arrows left, kill the enemy coming through the gap, which would have piled up and slowed the enemy down, Strider orders the archers, to attack with swords. I can't be noticing that the only people with military tactics are the bad guys. Legolas then also has a mental lapse, as for a few moments he thinks he's Tony Hawk. After many hours of discussing the end of the world, the Tree Council decide the best thing to do is ignore it. Now that Strider's got most of the elves killed, he decides it's time to fall back to the keep. Just then, the leader of the owls dies, and Strider pretends to cure. Yeah, no one's buying that. A hole is broken in the door, and surprisingly, King Theo gets stuck right in. And for this good deed, he gets shafted. Strider and Gimli sneak out a door whose reason for being there is beyond comprehension. Strider then uses Gimli as a dwarf grenade and throws him into the enemy. Then Strider joins him and they pirouette until the door can be bodged whole. Legolas, Legolas copies Rapunzel and knocks down his hair to save Strider and Gimli. The remaining soldiers, retreat inside the keep itself to finish filling out their last will and testaments. In his first great idea, Murray tells Treebeard to take them to Isengard. I mean, being sober is doing wonders for these two lads. Treebeard then sees what Saruman has done to the forest, roars in rage, and together with his mates, they pay Saruman a visit. In Osgiliath, which has seen better days, which isn't helped by it currently being attacked, we see Faramir and his merry men arrive with Frodo, Sam, and Colan. Faramir sees Frodo start tripping out just as a goth knight shows up on his giant flying lizard. Back at the keep, the valiant few start barring the door with chabels and chairs, because if wooden doors and stone walls didn't work, this absolutely will. After Strider remembers what Gandalf told him, he comes up with a truly awesome idea. Ride out directly into the thousands of waiting Uruk-hai. King Theo agrees wholeheartedly with this plan, and not only because he can't come up with a better one. Gimli goes to blow a truly massive horn, probably because he doesn't want to fall off yet another horse. King Theo and the group ride out into the Uruk-hai, make it down through the walkways, through the gates, down the ramp, and into the main army because, as we all know, riding a horse makes you invincible. Just then, as the sunrise breaks the sky, there is Gandalf and the entire Rohirrian cavalry behind him. Well, better late than never. Yet instead of attacking the Uruk-hai army on flat ground from behind, no, they decide to charge down the side of a mountain into the enemy. Well, at least they're trying a tactic. The armies of trees are having a gay old time destroying structures and killing anything that moves. Saruman wakes up from his nap to find everything has gone tits up. A group of trees destroying a dam and flood the entirety of Isengard, drowning any of Saruman's minions that remain. We see that the trees really don't do things by half. Frodo decides to have a stirring contest with the Flying Goth Knight and then taunts him by showing off his ring. Sam saves Frodo from becoming the lizard's lump, and as thanks, Frodo threatens to kill him. I'll say it now, I fully support Sam killing Frodo in his sleep. Frodo then has his second mental breakdown, and Sam has his first. Add Colan's schizophrenia to it, and we can all agree the ring is in truly great hands. The Rohirrian army roust and kill any Uruk-hai still breathing, while Gandalf laughs with glee at the carnage around him. Faramir, seeing and understanding the negative effects of the ring on anyone around it, lets the Geo return to their quest, proving Faramir is just as much of a goat as Boromir was. Colan then leads Frodo and Sam off in another random direction, while Sam tells dirty jokes to lighten the mood. And we end the second part with Colan having yet another round of arguing with the voices in his head, though this time he does in fact turn to the dark side. Once again, we are left with many questions. Will Gandalf ever actually use magic? Will Merry and Pippin ever get stoned again? Will Strider, Legolas, and Gimli get their sitcom spin-off? Will Sam finally give Frodo the curb stomping he so richly deserves? And will Frodo and Colan become besties over the love of his ring? Find out the answers to these and more in the exciting conclusion of The Lord of the Rings. Dun, dun, dun.